Okay, let's take a time out here from our focus on quantitative, qualitative, and let's talk about mixed research, combining and mixing quantitative and qualitative approaches in a single study. It is becoming the third research methodology paradigm. We teach a course in mixed methods research here at the University of Wyoming, and it's an exciting new field. Burke Johnson is one of the pioneers in this field, and that's why he emphasizes it in our textbook. So it comes from this idea of compatibility and then also from the idea of pragmatism. Com- Compatibility thesis says that quantitative and qualitative research are compatible. And hopefully, as you've learned about quantitative and qualitative research, you've seen how they can be compatible. The philosophy of pragmatism says that we should use whatever approach works best in the real world situation. And this is certainly wonderful for us in the state of Wyoming. There are times when we'd love to do a huge survey of 1,000 people, but the truth is we may only have one or two residents who can tell us about the experience we're interested in. And so sometimes we actually will conduct a qualitative study because we know that we don't have the numbers excuse me, for quantitative research. And of course, there are 100 other reasons to move towards the philosophy of pragmatism. One thing that's not a reason is, oh, I'm better at qualitative research, so therefore I'm going to make it fit. No, if your research question is truly qualitative, even if you love crunching numbers, you need to do some interviews, and vice versa. If it's a quantitative statement, if we need percentages and we need generalizability, then you need to stay in the quantitative arena. Okay, and then here is this idea that Johnson and Christensen came up with that's dialectical pragmatism. And we'll see more and more of this as Burke Johnson is. He's beginning focus groups, study groups. He has a big presence at our AERA conference. He's written books, publishing journals, and you'll see more and more of mixed method studies in the future. Okay, so what's the fundamental principle of mixed research? And you've seen this before in the chapters that we can thoughtfully and strategically mix or combine research methods. And that what we do by doing this is we correct for some of the weaknesses that are inherent in either a purely qualitative or a purely quantitative study. And that way, these strengths and weaknesses can balance each other out and can make up for each other. Okay, go into your textbook and just remind yourself what are the strengths and weaknesses of quantitative research, and then likewise, what are the strengths and weaknesses of qualitative research. And then here's a new chart or idea. What are the general characteristics of pragmatism? And I won't test you on this. This would be a very useful key if you were to write a mixed methods thesis. You could come back to this book and you could find some of the um, some of the ideas that are foundational to mixed methods research, and then you would have these if you need to write a section on the theoretical framework, which many professors, many journals require, although as qualitative research in particular and mixed methods become more and more accepted, researchers are finding that it's less, that they're less I'm sorry, there's less of a requirement to specifically state what their framework is. We're starting to be comfortable enough with those that they don't have to be stated. It would be analogous to in running a t-test if I had to go through the thinking of Fisher and those early statisticians back in the 1900s, the early 1900s, about why a t-test works. Eventually we won't have to tell our reader why qualitative research works. Okay, too much said. And then here are the strengths and weaknesses of mixed research. I do want to point out right here in the weaknesses and look at the strengths. The authors love the strengths. Of course, this is their bias. Um, you'll find on campus, at least in the present with the present campus climate, that most thesis chairs do not want you to do a mixed methods dissertation or thesis. And I understand that. I really do. I wanted to do mixed methods myself, and this was not a possibility for me. One reason is it takes a lot more time, it costs a lot more money, and it requires you and your chair to be experts on both sides, an expert on qualitative research, an expert on quantitative research. And the truth is, both types of research are so involved that it's rare to find someone who's an expert in both. And so your chair will almost surely steer you toward a mainly quantitative or a mainly qualitative thesis, and that is just to save you a little bit of time and frustration and to make sure that your expertise and her or his expertise are represented. For example, I just met this morning with a student. I'm on her committee, and she has done a qualitative thesis. It's a great thesis. It comes from a survey of women 50 and older and how they like to dress. It is a quantitative piece in her department, consumer science. They requested a quantitative piece to answer her research questions. However, she had lots of open-ended questions, and so in her chapter 4 results, she's got all sorts of comments that these women made, and they're wonderful. I think the comments are a lot more fun than the t-tests and the histograms. And so that will be considered a quantitative dissertation, but it's got plenty of qualitative flavor, and you can definitely do something like that. Likewise, in a qualitative dissertation, you can go through and tally responses. You can bring in test scores and other quantitative information that help to ground the theories you're coming up with, perhaps help to paint a richer picture of that lived experience. Depending on what you're doing, numbers can really bolster your study. Okay, so here's this idea of a research continuum. And see, Johnson and Christensen might call all of these mixed methods, but I would say until you get to that right side, fully mixed, you don't necessarily have to call your thesis or your publication a mixed method, because in the middle there's this partially mixed. It's a quantitative study, but I'm going to include the comments. Or it's a qualitative study, but I'm going to include some test scores. And then, of course, mono method on the left. And there's a little a figure with this in your book. Okay, now I'm gonna skip some of the details about some of the mixed method designs, and that's because these are not on the test. These are not something that you would walk around chatting about. They're quite complicated and involved, and the book presents some of the more common ones. But as mixed methods become more and more prominent and studied, there will be more. And you may actually, if you do a mixed method study, come up with the design of your own. It's just important to be aware that you need to have this design in mind before you begin. Are you going to have an equal status of qualitative and quantitative? Is it going to be sequential? I gather my quantitative results first and then I move into my qualitative. Or maybe you'll have a dominant status, and this would be more of something that you would see here on the Laramie campus, a dominant status, where you do your interviews and then you gather some quantitative data to go along with it, or you do your survey but you include some comments, some qualitative data. And the last part of the chapter talks about these important steps in the research study, and it's just a nice overview of how to conduct any kind of a study. So step number 1, determine if your design is appropriate. And this is a determination that I would highly encourage you to make in conjunction with your thesis chair. I've known just a handful of students who have been highly motivated, have gone ahead, done their research, written a thesis, submitted it to the chair, and the chair has said, hey, I wasn't on board with this from the beginning. throw it away. And that is just devastating. So don't let that happen to you. Meet with your chair, come up with your questions, be very clear on what route you're going to take. Number two, determine the rationale. Why are you using a mixed design? Are there weaknesses in your qualitative design and so you need to add quantitative or vice versa? And here are some reasons that, once again, this wouldn't be something I'd ask you to memorize, but you could cite in your paper. I love the complementarity of the two methods and how they help to answer my research question fully. It's good for triangulation or expansion of the topic. Okay, number three, select your design. Look at the figures in this book or look at some of the research that's been done and pick a mixed sampling design that's going to fit your research. Collect your data. Now here, I know data collection should be pretty straightforward, but it's not. And you need to hold to the method of data collection that fits with your mixed methods design in the same way that you would do so with a qualitative design. If you're looking at life stories, then you need narrative collection. If you're looking at grounded theory, you may need interview. um, Same thing in quantitative. If I want to run t-tests on attitudes, I need a survey. if i want um, if I want to make statements about medicine, then perhaps I need a trial test, an experiment. Okay, analyze the data using qualitative methods, quantitative methods. Go back to your method design so that you know when, in what order to analyze them, and how to let them inform each other, how to integrate those results. You continue validation throughout the entire study. You can go back to the chapter on validation for what needs to be done to make sure your study is trustworthy. You continually interpret the data and the findings. Now, this is something that, of course, naturally comes on the qualitative side, but you need to do this on your quantitative side too. Have you asked the right questions and run the right tests? Did your respondents tell you the things that you needed to know? And beware of personal bias. You need reflexivity. It's a critical self reflection. Did I let my bias get in the way here in the choices that I made? And then finally, write your research report. Write it. Just write a sloppy version first and then come back and rewrite and rewrite. Continue to pare it down. That's what's so hard for me. And eventually, you'll have something for presentation, for publication that you can be really proud of. It's a great set of steps. These 8 steps apply to any research project you might do. Enjoy this chapter. Enjoy the enthusiasm that Johnson and Christensen have for this topic. It's exciting. This is definitely in the frontier of research.